Hey, have you heard about this movie Jaws? It's about a shark menacing this beach community and these three guys hunting it. You should really check it out because it's only one of the best movies ever made. Jaws has been my favorite movie since I was a kid, and I have seen it dozens of times. So what is it that keeps me coming back for more? Why does this movie never get old? Let's find out as I explore why I love Jaws. So this isn't necessarily a video about why Jaws is a classic or about the making of the movie. You can find plenty of information about that, packed with Richard Dreyfuss telling that same shark is not working story.
The shark is not working. The shark is not working.
This is about what I love about the movie, what I look forward to revisiting each and every time. And instead of basically just doing a commentary track for the film, I decided to make a list. So in no particular order, let's begin. Oh, and if you haven't seen Jaws, this video is gonna get super spoilery, so go watch it.
You get a ratio on this thing?
Number 1, cinematography. Jaws was shot by cinematographer Bill Butler, who, much like Spielberg, had the task of crafting a gorgeous piece of cinema under immensely challenging conditions.
The shark is not working.
Butler had already shot one of the great movies of the 1970s, Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation, and went on to shoot more classics like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Grease, Rocky IV, and Hot Shots. Butler's cinematography sets the scene from the very beginning, painting Chrissy Watkins' demise against a shimmering, magical ocean, a striking portrait of serenity broken by a force of nature. He also uses several techniques to escalate the tension leading up to Alex Kintner's death, keeping the foreground and the background in focus in this POV shot to demonstrate Brody's split focus.
Can't get down to the office and that garbage truck next to the office.
And of course, borrowing one of Hitchcock's techniques from Vertigo, the dolly zoom, when Brody's world is turned upside down by the shark attack. But apart from the fancy camera tricks and techniques, I really don't think Jaws gets enough credit for just how beautiful it is. There are still shots that I look forward to each and every time that I watch Jaws, which makes every rewatch feel like the first time. Number 2. The music. Establishing tone using the score is essential to the success of Jaws, and John Williams demonstrates his brilliance as a composer with this film. The Jaws theme is perfect, simple yet fear-inducing. It creates an instant feeling of dread, and largely due to the mechanical shark's problems,
The shark is not working.
stands in as a sinister presence even when you see nothing. The POV shots underwater and Williams' score both establish the shark's lethality long before we ever see it. So much is said about the shark theme, though, that people overlook the life that Williams' score breathes into the other scenes in the movie. It's also important to note that Williams knows when not to use music, and he smartly knows that Quint's U.S.S. Indianapolis speech needs nothing to maximize its impact, with a very subtle underscore coming in as Quint begins to describe the horrors of his past shark encounter.
He'd been bitten in half below the waist.
Good composers write good music. Great composers know when they don't need to. Number 3, subtle storytelling. Every movie has to achieve a few basic things, and one of them is establishing who the characters are and what they want. Some writers refer to this as laying pipe, communicating to the audience the essential details needed for the story to continue.
Amity is a summer town. We need summer dollars.
There are other definitions of laying pipe, but let's not get sidetracked or demonetized. Some movies lay their pipe well, others, not so much.
This is Katana. She's got my back. I would advise not getting killed by her. Her sword traps the souls of its victims.
One thing I've always loved about Jaws is the way the script, credited to Peter Benchley and Carl Gottlieb, establishes its characters in subtle yet effective ways. Take Chief Brody's first scene, which establishes that he's the chief of police, new in town, and inexperienced with shark attacks. All of this is conveyed in a way that doesn't insult the audience's intelligence by giving a flat rundown of who Brody is. We understand that he's new in town because of the conversation about where the sun shines into the bedroom.
How come the sun didn't used to shine in here?
I bought the house in the fall. This is summer.
His inexperience is communicated both through his confusion about which phone is ringing and his lack of knowledge about standard procedure.
What do they usually do? Wash out the
make sure you don't go past
What?
And we know he's the chief of police because he gets into a big cruiser that says Amity Police on it. Listen, some solutions are the easy ones. Throughout the film, Brody's outsider status keeps him at odds with the other characters, and it's almost always emphasized in subtle ways instead of on-the-nose dialogue. Like how he positions himself on the outside of the city council bench until he's asked to join the rest of the city officials.
Martin, would you please? Chief Brody.
Or the physical separation during the dinner scene on the Orca. Quint and Hooper bond over their shared love of the ocean, while Brody remains physically apart from both men to underscore his inexperience. Through staging and good writing, this allows the story to progress and Brody's character to develop naturally, without groaning under the weight of dozens of plotty, obvious dialogue scenes. Number 4. Humor. Like its cinematography, an element of Jaws that I think gets overlooked by a lot of people is its humor. To be fair, a lot of the film's jokes are pretty straightforward.
Full throttle! Won't have to take this abuse much longer.
But because a lot of the movie's other jokes also contribute to its mounting tension, I don't think some of them get the credit they deserve. Like the horrified look of the older couple that the mayor asked to get in the water. And let's not forget the movie's most famous line is also its funniest joke.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Because it comes right on the heels of the big shark reveal, and because it's mainly about how pants-pissingly scared Chief Brody is, a lot of people may dismiss its humor. Horror and humor at the movies aren't really that far apart, which is why the first thing most audience members do in a theater after a big scare is laugh. You're gonna need a bigger boat is the ultimate release valve as the tension and terror mount. Number 5. Quint's first scene. Not only is this scene one of the most memorable character introductions of all time, but it makes such an impact that we don't even need to hear another line of dialogue from Quint for 45 minutes.
I don't want no volunteers, I don't want no mates, there's too many captains on this island.
It's also another example of good screenwriting. We never have to have a big exposition scene about who Quint is or what he does. This scene says it all. Bonus points for him foreshadowing his own death, too.
This shark, swallow you whole. Shaking. Tenderizing. Down you go.
Number 6. Mayor Vaughn. Has any character ever represented the face of bureaucratic cluelessness better than Mayor Larry Vaughn?
You yelled shark. We've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
Murray Hamilton, perhaps best known at the time for his role in The Graduate, breathes life into a character whose absurd decisions are both horrifying and laughable. From his willful ignorance of the island's ongoing shark problem,
For Christ's sake, tomorrow's the 4th of July, and we will be open for business. It's going to be one of the best summers we've ever had.
to his efforts to reassign Brody to juvenile delinquent detail,
Sick vandalism. That is a deliberate mutilation of a public service message.
to the evasive interview he gives to a TV reporter,
We have, in fact, caught and killed a large predator that supposedly injured some bathers.
Vaughn's attempts to reject a reality where there is still a threat to public safety prove to be Brody's first major obstacle. And the pathos he brings to his final scene, devastated, shocked, nearly catatonic, keeps Vaughn from being a one-note caricature.
My kids, well, that beats true.
Also, hell of a wardrobe. Number 7. Chief Brody. All three main characters are unique and complex, but my favorite has always been Chief Brody. Brody has a clearly presented arc and emerges from the third act not only as a great character, but as a changed character. His journey from water-fearing outsider to shark-killing hero is remarkable, and it hits most of the main points of the monomyth, the hero's journey popularized by Joseph Campbell. Now that's a topic for another video, many of which have already been made, but it's worth looking up because it basically breaks down why we love so many of the movies and stories that we love. Each of Brody's steps is distinct and underscored by small but significant details. Notice, for example, that even while evacuating swimmers from the ocean following the attack on Alex Kintner, Brody takes extra care not to even touch the water. That changes after the attack in the estuary that nearly takes the life of his son. Brody answers the call to adventure, confirming to Ellen that Amity is now their home.
Want to take him home?
Like to New York?
No. Home here.
But still, Brody doesn't even really touch the water until the very end of the movie, the moment in which he conquers his fears and becomes the hero that Hooper and Quint couldn't be. Number 8, Ellen Brody. I don't think Chief Brody's arc works without Lorraine Gary as Ellen Brody. Her relationship with Martin isn't built on conflict or anger, and she never tearfully yells at her husband that he can't put his life at risk, because she knows he has to.
What am I going to tell the kids?
Tell them I'm going fishing.
Her unwavering support of Chief Brody and their genuinely playful and loving relationship helps make the story more relatable and believable. A manufactured storyline between the Brodys, like the one that was written into Peter Benchley's original book, would have been superfluous and distracting. Instead, we have two rational people who worry about and want to protect each other. And that's all the movie needs. Number 9, local flavor. Many of the supporting roles in the film were cast with Martha's Vineyard locals. Alex Kintner and his mother, the shark victim in the estuary, and Ben Gardner, just to name a few, feel real because they are real.
When we get them silly bastards down in that rock pile, there'll be some fun. They'll wish their fathers had never met their mothers.
And their presence, alongside a more established star like Roy Scheider in the lead role, only further makes Brody stick out like a sore thumb on Amity Island. Lee Fierro as Mrs. Kintner in particular provides the punch in the gut that drives Brody to continue his investigation, saving lives and perhaps the entire island.
You knew it was dangerous, but you let people go swimming anyway.
Number 10, the edit. Jaws is superbly edited, unafraid to break rules and make waves when it serves the film. This is undoubtedly due to the influence of editor Verna Fields, who consulted with Steven Spielberg throughout the production of the film. In addition, typical editing rules are discarded in some scenes in a true collaboration between picture and sound, particularly at a time when filmmakers like Robert Altman were still challenging the conventions of traditional sound editing.
We had a shark attack at South Beach this morning, man. Fatal! I'm gonna back down the beach.
Oh, and I want you to read some semantics, but I don't want to get beaten up. This is Larry Vaughan on there.
Shortly after the first shark sighting, this crossfade would seem to be counter to the rules of cinema.
Yeah, but we could radio in and get a bigger boat out here.
But it only underscores the futility of Brody's argument. Both Verna Fields and the Jaws sound team won Academy Awards for their work on the film, and Jaws would be the last film that Fields edited. Following the success of the movie, she became one of the first women to become a Hollywood executive, working at Universal until her untimely death in 1982 of cancer. Now, it should be noted, most modern versions of Jaws have replaced the original mix with an improved 5.1 or 7.1 soundtrack. This new mix replaces some of the original sound effects with versions that are, in my opinion, vastly inferior.
On land or sea or foam. Wherever I'm near. On land or sea or foam.
Smile, you son of a bitch! You son of a...
So, if you're able to listen to the movie in its original mono soundtrack, I highly suggest it. Number 11, the scare. I still remember the first time Ben Gardner's head popped out of that boat. And one of my favorite things to do is watch people who haven't seen the movie before experience it for the first time. Now, the brilliant thing about this scare is that it's the last thing you're expecting. Up to this point, the movie has established that if the shark is going to show up, the music comes with it. And the shark is what you're expecting. So, no music, no shark. Instead, we get one of the best jump scares in movie history. Number 12, the trio. The three main characters of Brody, Quint, and Hooper make up one of the most well-written and well-acted trios in modern cinema. Each character has qualities that the other two lack, and only together can they achieve their goal. Hooper brings intelligence and resources, but lacks humility.
Proves that you wealthy college boys don't have the education enough to admit when you're wrong.
Quint brings experience and drive, but is so obsessive and short-sighted that he contributes to his own demise. Brody brings rationality and common sense, but his lack of experience renders him essentially useless to the other two.
Not too good, is it, Chief?
This echoes the dynamic between other trios like Star Trek's Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, where Kirk represents recklessness and courage, Spock represents logic and reason, and McCoy represents passion and realism. Or Harry, Ron, and Hermione, where Harry is famous, Ron makes faces, and Hermione does everything. These are characters who are each foils for one another, yet ultimately prove to be greater than the sum of their parts. The solution to defeating the shark lies in Brody's synthesis of both men's ideologies. He blows up the shark using an air tank, equipment that Quint earlier ridiculed Hooper for bringing on board.
What you got here? Portable shower or a monkey cage?
Shot by a gun that Hooper ridiculed Quint for using.
Quint, what are you doing? Don't waste your time, Quint, come on.
The shark is really just a reason to get these three characters together and watch them grow or literally die trying. Number 13, setup and payoff. One of the most annoying things when I'm watching a movie is when it makes a critical plot point obvious with blatant setup.
I'm injecting Khan's platelets into the deceased tissue of the necrotic host. Khan's cells regenerate like nothing I've ever seen, and I want to know why. Khan. Once we caught him, I synthesized the serum from his super blood.
The screenplay for Jaws, however, sets up the end of the film in a smart way. Let's look specifically at the air tank that Brody uses to kill the shark. In a lazier movie, it would appear like magic. In Jaws, it's interwoven into the film, so its use seems natural and earned. The first appearance of an air tank is in the book that Brody is using to research sharks in the first act of the movie. It's a brief image, but the camera doesn't linger. Aboard the Orca, Hooper yells at Brody for pulling the wrong knot, releasing the tanks.
You screw around with these tanks and they're gonna blow up.
Yeah, that's real fine, expensive gear you brought out here, Mr. Hooper.
In hindsight, this seems like obvious setup, but in the moment, it's a character beat further establishing that Brody doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
Hey, Chiefy, next time you just ask me which line to pull, right?
The air tanks are kept alive as an important element later when Brody rushes to secure them as the ship lists near the climax, an action that can also be seen as part of Brody's continuing education on how to act aboard the ship. The air tanks are seen again when Brody goes into the cabin to retrieve Hooper's poison-tipped needle. This establishes its presence in the cabin for later, where it also plays a key role in Quint's death. By the time Brody tosses the tank into the shark's mouth, its location and functionality has been established throughout the film, leading to a climax that feels natural and satisfying instead of forced and obvious. Number 14, the U.S.S. Indianapolis.
Japanese submarine slammed 2 torpedoes into our side, Chief.
Obviously, this is one of the best monologues in movie history, and Robert Shaw's delivery is a masterclass for any dramatic actor.
Sometimes the shark go away. Sometimes he wouldn't go away.
This is also exposition done right. After spending almost the entire movie with this character, the audience finally learns why he's so motivated to take down this shark.
I don't know how many sharks, maybe 1,000. I don't know how many men, they average 6 an hour.
And if you haven't seen Jaws in a while, ask yourself this question. Where in the movie does this scene take place? Now, my guess is that most people would say about halfway through. But in actuality, the Indianapolis story kicks off about half an hour before the movie is over. Most blockbusters wouldn't even consider this, stopping the action for a 5-minute monologue just as the movie takes its turn into the third act. But while the big shark explosion at the end may be the resolution of the movie, Quint's speech is what kicks off the climax, the moment when all 3 main characters finally find themselves on the same page. Notice that all 3 characters start the scene physically divided, Hooper and Quint by the table, and Brody, as we mentioned before, across the cabin. Now by the end of this scene, all 3 are at the table together, unified by Quint's story, and finally bound together to accomplish their mission. While Robert Shaw's performance rightly gets a lot of the credit in this scene, I've also always found Richard Dreyfuss's reaction to be just as important. As a shark expert, Hooper knows what happened to the Indianapolis, and his horror is the perfect reflection of what Brody and the audience are about to learn. Now, for those who grew up with Jaws on VHS like me, Dreyfuss's performance was completely lost when the picture was cropped to fit 4x3 square televisions in a process known as pan and scan. The fact that Jaws, and most movies for that matter, are now available and seen in their native aspect ratios is one of my favorite advances in home theater technology. Number 15, Quint's death. Ooh, Quint's death is brutal. A stunning example of fate getting the last laugh as he's forced to live the very nightmare we just watched him describe in horrifying detail. For many it may seem cruel, but it also raises the stakes and allows the audience to believe that Brody may actually be in danger after all. And with Hooper neutralized, Brody's triumph must come at the cost of Quint's life. Otherwise, he would remain a bystander, unable to complete his arc. Number 16, the last line. Maybe it's because it's not on camera, but I've always felt the last line of Jaws should be included among the great last lines of any movie.
I used to hate the water. I can't imagine why.
These lines perfectly encapsulate the film, wrapping up Brody's journey with the kind of sly humor and interaction we've seen from both him and Hooper throughout the movie. It's the final sigh of relief as the audience kicks to shore along with the characters and out of the theater. Number 17, this guy.
But what kind? What kind of shark?
Tiger shark.
A what?
Just because. Those are just a few of the reasons why I love Jaws. I could probably come up with a bunch more, but who has time for that? There's lots of other movies I love out there that I can't wait to dive into. What about you? What movies do you love? And is the "a what" guy your favorite part of Jaws? I wouldn't blame you if he was. Let me know below, and as always, thanks for watching. Farewell and adieu for now, and I'll see you soon.